Okay, so at this portion, we're still talking about the infant emerging into language. Now, language is already there. Right now, I'm not going to speculate on the first language or the pre-linguistics to humanity itself. I just want to speak on describing what it is that we say a child goes through when picking up the language. Okay, because the language has been laid down. It's within our words. It's within the distinctions of knowing the difference between white and black, and being able to make distinct these shapes because there are edges and there are different distinctions, meaning there's edges, so there's a distinction between black and there's white, and there's a distinction between the shape of this character and that character, and there's a difference between a southern draw and a Boston accent, or this language and that, or my tonality and someone else's tonality. There's difference, but it's where things are common. Like when a little baby, a little infant speaks, it doesn't sound as robust and as fluid as an adult might, but it's still speaking what we would say the same word is, or it's noting the same things that the adult is noting, and that they can carry on an interaction with one another. So at one point, the baby will move and slobber and inhale and exhale, and it will eventually articulate a sound that brings in further data, that brings in further recognition, where to the point a baby will finally say, with a dynamic a desire, if you will, ah, and that will be heard as mama, or and it's good enough. It's close enough, good enough for the government. So they say, oh, the baby spoke its first words. It said or da. Oh, great! It said dada. That's just fabulous. So then that's reinforced, and then the mother's taken away, and the baby, instead of going wah, now says and the first approach to articulation from just the bellowing, the accent of the bellowing, is replaced. So slowly, the rhythm and the melody are starting to make it. There's a distinction within these vibrations here, because everything's just a vibration, right? And the vibration and inputs of different data, and whether or not it's static, or whether or not it's moving so slow you can't notice a difference, or whether or not it's moving very fast and you can note a difference. So from that, eventually the baby picks up mama, dada. It picks up toy or ball or something else, because it's also dealing with its nervous system and accents and textures of its own nervous system as well, to help its body's impulses articulate interaction with the world, and then eventually get the tongue to present it and get the hand to write it. Now, the language was here before I was born, and then I've inherited the English language. So the language was not in my consciousness prior to my being born, and it was not recognized as language until I was not just speaking and speaking sentences, but when I was noting a game in which the speaking was then pointed to, and I noticed, oh, what's that? Oh, that's language. It's how we speak. It's how we communicate. Now, as a side note here, Wittgenstein brings up lions and humans, and mentions that if a lion could speak, we wouldn't understand it. Now, I understand this because an infant lion will never be able to rub its eye, or pick its nose, or look over the horizon line of its nose at this binocular distance as opposed to this binocular distance. And its lips will it'll flutter and its tongue may never pull back the articulation that we have gone through as a species. So language is species specific, and it's species specific to humans. Now, if we say that another animal has language or communication, we're just describing the accents of the data that they're interacting with, the accents and the articulation and the rhythms of these accents. So it's not to suggest that we can keep up a full dialogue and interaction with an animal. We can make clicks and we can repeat the clicks and the words and patterns and elicit responses. But nevertheless, we inherit the language. So back to that, we're picking up, and they say mama, they say dada, that becomes mama, that becomes dada, that becomes ball. Now, whether or not if the mom leaves or the dad leaves or the ball leaves, the words, the expression itself doesn't require that there's any internal imaging that goes on. There's no requirement that my internal imaging ever even remotely looks like somebody else's internal imaging. It's even logically possible that no one has internal imaging. You don't need it. A lot of people have a monologue, but you don't need a monologue in your head, and you certainly don't need a graphic monologue in your head in order to speak language, like the shape of the or the, because words also are in process. They're not always associated with things that are part of the rules of the grammar itself, the interplay of the grammar. But I guess we'll start on to something like that in the next one here.